give folks a little bit of a breakdown on the research that you're aware of around different types of diet and their impact on health and performance? Is there actually any material impact on being, vegan versus carnivore versus paleo, or is it about other variables like your body fat percentage, sleep, micronutrient quantity, etc.?
So when we sort of look at how each of these diets are made up, we first probably have to go right back to the basics of the three macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, and how they're utilized by the body towards different energy systems. And then if we want to get to another level of complication, our body has different preferences depending on the activity that we're doing, whether it'll burn fats or whether it'll burn carbohydrates and sugars. And each person potentially may have a genetic variability, whether they prefer to burn more fat at rest than carbohydrates. And that's when we start to see people who potentially try out some of these new diets that have been probably around for 20 to 30 years now at this point surrounding nutrition research. And they find that it does bring great efficacy. So, for example, a keto diet is basically you limit your protein intake to less than, it's around 100 grams per day. You limit your total carbohydrate intake to about 10% of your total calories, and then the rest comes from fatty acids. And basically that was adopted as a fashion towards potentially the impact that carbohydrates have on insulin secretion and how people potentially develop diabetes. And we often see with those who follow this sort of high fat, moderate protein, low carbohydrate diet that their sensitivity to glucose and to carbohydrates that they ingest improves. And that potentially is an artifact of giving their pancreas, which makes insulin, a break, and their cells get a break from being exposed to glucose. You have probably more so the stricter form of keto, which is carnivore. And carnivore is essentially just eat anything that is from an animal. So from the flesh, head to tail. They do not consume any carbohydrates. Their fats and proteins are obtained through animal sources alone. So there's no supplementation. They believe in sort of that primal instinct of hunter-gatherer and obtaining your nutrition via meat sources alone. They're vegetarian, where they will consume some animal products. So in terms of their nutrition intake, you probably don't see as much of a deficit where they're able to consume dairy and to some extent eggs. Within vegetarian, you have pescatarian, where you're eating some level of fish as well. And then you arrive at vegan, which is probably the most strictest of them all. One of the interesting points surrounding why veganism has become so, important is that to produce 1 kilo of animal protein, we need to utilize 6 kilos of biomass or 6 kilos of plant produce in order to create 1 kilo of animal produce. So the argument there is that it's an unsustainable method of continuously providing the planet with a source of animals and their impact towards potential global warming. I don't fall into any sort of tribalism. Everything in my mind has a relative flaw. And at the end of the day, it comes back to the basics of providing the body with those macronutrients, fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. I guess one of the more extreme examples that we find within the fitness industry that became very popular over the last 10 to 15 years was If It Fits Your Macros, IIYFM. And it was basically, you gave yourself a target. So if you ingested, say, 3,000 calories per day, of that 3,000 calories, you divided it down into the particular percentages of each of the macronutrients that you needed to obtain in that day. And it didn't matter what way you obtained that nutrition, whether it was from Pop-Tarts, sugary cereal, vegetable oils, whatever way you wanted to obtain those macronutrients, depending on your lifestyle, your sweet tooth, etc.